Good day, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is your teacher host, Cesar Vizcaya, and today I will be sharing with you a lesson entitled The Art of Emerging Europe. Now, when we talk about Europe, whether we are talking general or specific things about Europe um, and its history, we usually think of in terms of its contributions primarily to the global artistic landscape. The thought of the Renaissance and even mentioning famous landscapes like in Paris, you have the Eiffel Tower. If you're seeing in your screen, these are just some of the legacies, artistic legacies of Europe. You have there a magnificent photo of the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy. And then you have to your right the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France. And then at the center, you have there a very famous portrait uh, known throughout the world by the name Mona Lisa. There was even a song that was created about that portrait. Okay, Europe actually boasts of many well-known artistic legacies. Aside from these um, uh, things of artistic value that I have that you're seeing on your screen. Okay, so in this lesson, since the title is Art of Emerging Europe, I will be discussing and we will retrace the development of art in Europe and the artistic movements that emerge and are continually influencing contemporary art. Okay? When we say contemporary art, the art that we have at the present. And even it influenced what we call a division of art, which is modern and then the contemporary. So much goes to say that the artistic influence of Europe is very vast. It has spread throughout the world. Now, it is said here in the introduction of this lesson, it is said here that art is an integral part of European history. So when we say integral, it's part and parcel of mentioning uh, um, when we talk of European history, it's very difficult to separate the two, history and art. Beginning from the time of the ancient Greeks to the contemporary times, art was an influential medium in communicating beliefs and ideologies. These have been reflected in the art movements that swept Europe in different time periods. Each movement upheld unique tenets and philosophies that highlighted the trends and changes of the times before transitioning to the next. Okay. So it only means to say that in Europe, many artistic movements were born in one of the centers of civilization in the world, and that's Europe. Now, for this lesson, I will attempt to guide you through the major periods in Western art history and also give you a glimpse of the artworks produced during the different time periods and the art movements, also, although you can practically research it on your own. There are so many references to go to. I will guide you where you can get those and the importance of art in the development of Western culture. So here is a breakdown of the subtopics that this lesson covers. So I will be giving a brief review of what we took last time. So we have prehistoric art, we have classical art, we have early medieval, Romanesque, and Gothic art. We have Renaissance, Romantic art, contemporary and postmodern art, and the 19th century movements. So European art, or they have another term for that, Western art. So ano na sila, synonymous. So when you say European art, you are referring to Western art. This encompasses the history of visual art in Europe. So it's mainly about visual arts. Um, uh, we're not eliminating the other forms of art like musical or dance, because suffice it to say that Europe is also a center of the performing art. So you can mention West End, no? A very famous place in terms of theater. Okay? And it already has a counterpart in the United States, which is Broadway. No? But mainly, Europe is a center, a very bustling center of visual art. No? European prehistoric art started as cave painting. So isipin nyo, all these modern art, contemporary art that you might have seen online about Europe, nagsimula lang siya as cave paintings. Of course, when at the start of civilization, it's really like that. People had to start from somewhere, right? And petroglyph art. Fortunately, we have that here in the Philippines. We also have what we call cave paintings and petroglyph art. If I'm not mistaken, we have one in Rizal, the petroglyph caves. So in Europe, this kind of art forms, the cave paintings, you know, and the petroglyph art was characteristic of the period between the Paleolithic and the Iron Age. So I have already taught in the previous lesson about the Paleolithic age, or the Old Stone Age and the Iron Age. Written histories of European art often begin with the art of the ancient Middle East and the ancient Aegean civilization. So this is halfway between the Middle East and the civilization in Greece. No, yeah, ancient Aegean. Aegean is part of. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's the sea, okay, the Aegean Sea, where um, most of the Mediterranean countries are, like Greece, Cyprus, etc. Okay, dating from the 3rd millennium BC. Art of one form or another existed all over Europe, wherever there were people, living signs such as carvings, decorated artifacts, and huge standing stones. So, of course, where there is civilization, you can always spot artistic evidences that people left before, perhaps before that particular group of people vanished or they migrated elsewhere. However, a consistent pattern of artistic development within Europe becomes clear only with the art of ancient Greece, which was adopted, transformed, and carried by the Roman Empire across much of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It does not mean that there are no artistic things that came out during the prehistoric age. Of course, meron yan, like I have discussed last time. But of course, there was more apparent development when the Hellenistic civilization came. No? We refer to the Greek civilization also as the Hellenistic. So there was more development during that time than the time which came before that. The art of the classical period waxed and waned throughout the next 2,000 years. So I'm already giving you a bird's eye view of what happened from that period when it started from the prehistoric age to the modern times. Here we're talking about the classical period. The classical period slipped into a distant memory during the medieval period, and then it reemerged in the period known as Renaissance. It suffered a decay during the Baroque period and reappeared in a refined form in neoclassicism and reborn in postmodernism. So later, malalaman natin kung ano yung mga naging developments and how did these, or why the author of this particular lesson said that the art of the classical period waxed and waned, and the rise and fall of artistic movements came about. Now, before the 1800s, the Catholic Church is a major influence upon European art. Okay, there was indeed a period in European art in which there were more liturgical or religious themes that were prevalent in artworks. Commissioned works of the church, architecture, painting, and sculpture provided a major source of work for artists. So you might mention there many works from renowned Italian painters like Michelangelo, who painted The Last Supper, and then the painting in the Sistine Chapel, the Creation, and so many other things. They also had these monuments or even statues of biblical personages like David. You will later you will see a picture of him, okay, of the statue. The history of the church was very much reflected in the history of art during this period. So it's more on the years before the 1800s. Now, in the same period of time, there was also a renewed interest in heroes and heroines, tales of mythological gods and goddesses, great wars, and bizarre creatures which were not connected to religion. So aside from religious figures and religious themes, there also came so many figures, paintings about people from the stories, specifically mythological gods and goddesses. But of course, in some countries like in Greece, it's not just literature for them. These literary figures, gods and goddesses, were also tied with their religious practice. No, andyan na yung Olympian gods like Zeus, Hera, Athena. In Greece, they are not just part of the stories; they are part of their religious practice. No, that's in ancient Greece. Most art of the last 200 years has been produced without much reference to religion and often with no particular ideology at all. But art has often been influenced by political issues, whether reflecting the concerns of patrons or the artist. So time came that more and more people, particularly artists, were seeing other themes other than religion and literature to be the subject of art. Nakakita na sila ngayon ng ibang opportunity. Of course, when developments came, no, as the thoughts and theories of philosophies came about, yan, sumabay na rin yung mga artists, and they started developing this kind of social political themes in their art. Andyan na yung they were painting about wars, they were painting about the sufferings of people, etc. European art is arranged into a number of stylistic periods which historically overlap each other. Kasi kaya yan nag-overlap dahil there are principles from one movement that take principles from another movement, and they almost coexisted at the same time. Yung isa develop while the other one is still existing until the former The former theory vanished into practice dahil pinapractice na ng iba yung ibang artistic concepts. So that's how it happened. Okay. Now, these periods are the classical, the Byzantine, medieval, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, neoclassical, modern, postmodern, and new European painting. So like I've said, it's mostly visual. Actually, it's not complete. These are just major divisions of artistic movements. There are other movements that are sub-classified in each movement. Okay, it will really take a lot of time before we fully discuss those. But these are the major movements that came about in Europe. Now, so I have given you an overview of the development of the artistic development in Europe. Now let's go down to the specifics. So I'm going to give a rundown of the developments that happened in each time period in art and history. So merong overlapping discussion to. As we go discussing some points in history, it's inevitable na mag-discuss tayo na something about art. So let's go first with prehistoric art. Okay, here in Europe, prehistoric art is an important part of the European cultural heritage. Prehistoric art history is usually divided into four main periods: the Stone Age, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. So yung Mesolithic niyan, kaya hindi na na-mention, it's because ino-overlap niya yung Old Stone Age and the New Stone Age. Stone Age dyan, referring to the Paleolithic. Most of the remaining artifacts of this period are small sculptures and cave paintings. Sobrang tagal na kasi ng periods na yan. Most of the artistic artifacts have given to erosion, nasira na by natural causes, or even by man-made forces na hindi naman napapansin agad. Like there are some who conduct mining and they are not aware that they are digging through some important archaeological, historical, and artistic artifacts in that area. Much surviving prehistoric art are small portable sculptures, like I have discussed in the last lesson, with a small group of female Venus figurines. So kung natatandaan niyo, yung Venus figurines are, ano yon, figure ng naked woman yun na enlarged. It has enlarged breasts at yung malaki yung katawan, no? Very exaggerated. Those are more known as the Venus of Willendorf. Okay, and these existed between 24,000 to 22,000 BC. And these are scattered across Central Europe. And also, you have the 30-centimeter tall Lowenmensch figurine of about 30,000 BCE, which is older than the Venus of Willendorf that have been discovered. Now, there is another artifact that I was not able to mention last time in the lesson. The title of this is the Swimming Reindeer. It's a carving actually, a carving in bone or antler of animals. Kung nakakita na kayo siguro ng buto ng hayop na namatay na, or even yung antler or yung ivory ng elepante, early people before had thought of using that as a surface to carve. So it's not a new technology. It's an old technology that people were able to do that using very rough tools. So you can just imagine the tools that they have used there, kahit ano pa yan, bakal pa yan, it's still very rough because They haven't yet perfected the art of metal craft before, but they were able to do that. No? It is one of the finest of a number of Magdalenian carvings that have been found during the period of the Upper Paleolithic period, though they are outnumbered by engraved pieces, which are sometimes classified as sculpture. So here is the photo of that. So siguro mapapansin nyo, parang hindi siya mukhang reindeer, no? But this is a reindeer actually. Yung rendering kasi nito, let's say this figure, this larger one, these are two reindeers. According to the source that I have read, this reindeer, ito, you're seeing the face and then the antler here. Ito yung katawan niya. This is a female reindeer. And a reindeer at the back is a male reindeer. Ang nag-designate sa kanila is yung kanilang antler, because male reindeers have bigger antlers, yung sungay nila. Ang sungay ng male reindeer kasi nag-branch out. At sa babae, hindi siya ganun ka-prominent. So, this has been carved into ivory. So nakikita nyo naman, akala nyo parang it's wood. But if this is wood, hindi na siguro ito ma-preserve ng ganito katagal because this has been, siguro nabulok na siya or something. So it had to be engraved in a material that is lasting, and that's ivory. Okay, so yun, the early people or whoever was responsible for carving this made the perfect choice for a material to represent this kind of sabihin na nating sculpture to. So nakakatuwa. It only shows the extent of technology and civilization that people had applied in doing this kind of art. So for whatever function this performed, we still cannot determine that if it's really for artistic or it is something, it is a part of a larger sculpture or installation for whatever purpose. If it's for religious or for decoration, we're not aware. Kasi napakatanda na nga ng artifact na to. Kaya lang siya nakakategorize na artistic, it's because of the technique that was apparently applied in carving, painstakingly carving on this kind of material. So syempre kung wala ka namang skill or talent for that, hindi mo magagawa yan eh. So pumapasok pa rin siya as artistic skill. But of course, there is a technology, there was a technology that was involved here. With the beginning of the Mesolithic period in Europe, figurative sculpture greatly reduced and remained a less common element in art than relief decoration of practical objects until the Roman period. So nung pumapasok na yung panahon ng what we call here in the Philippines, gitnang bato to bagong bato and then to the Iron Age, or the age of metal, we have iron, bronze. Yung bilang, yung quantity, yung quantity of figurines have lessened in number, not because people were no longer interested, but because they have found new media, like other materials that they could use to develop art or to do some decorations. And they were also looking into more of the practical uses of these decorations in their lives, or maybe they're also beginning to explore the aesthetics of it, although hindi pa rin syempre very pronounced yung term na aesthetics for the early people. Now, where the places where these artistic artifacts were discovered vary, no? But like I've said, it is scattered throughout Europe. But the best places to see these well-preserved murals, and also to know more about how people conducted their affairs during that time, is sa mga kuweba, no? So we have what we call the parietal art, okay? Cave art. The oldest the oldest of which is found in Spain in a cave known as El Castillo. And it dates back to 40,800 BCE. Now, of course, it's the oldest, but there are also other cave uh, places in Europe where there are where parietal art can also be found. You have the Lascaux Cave of Altamira, the Grotte de Cusack, Pech Merle Cave of Neo, Chauvet Cave, Font de Gaume, Creswell Crags, Nottinghamshire, England, Coliboya Cave in Romania, which is considered the oldest cave painting in Central Europe, in Magura Belogradchik, Bulgaria. These are all in Europe. Now, cave paintings, even if you're only going to examine the cave paintings with the most basic tools that you have, you can already have an insight into the culture and beliefs of that particular era. But of course, if you're going to go there personally when all this pandemic is over, if you have the opportunity, maybe there are some restrictions that they will not be allowed to touch that because of the age. You can only just take some glimpses or picture, but you'll discover it's quite old. And how they were able to preserve that, maybe it's because of the conditions inside the caves, that it's quite cold there and it's not usually visited. Only animals ever go to that place, no? And maybe people who are looking for shelter one time or are digging through archaeological sites have chanced upon discovering those. So here are examples of the cave that I have mentioned, in El Castillo. So it's obviously Cueva yan, no? And when you look at these markings, no, when you enlarge, ito yung makikita mo. Nyo. So enlarged hands, yung technique natin na ginagawa na when we put, let's say, an image, let's say our hands on a piece of paper, and then lalagyan natin ng kulay sa, i-outline natin yung kamay natin, and then like crepas, and then you have the color, or akala mo parang nag-i-spray paint sila, no? It's a very remarkable artwork. Noon pa pala nauuso, noon pa matagal nang nauso yan. So what we can say is hindi na siya bago. So here is a enlarged portion of that cave where there are markings, and these markings are not natural markings. These are markings that have patterns. So masyado siyang pantay to be natural. So this must be man-made. And perhaps these are human attempts to communicate a message, although archaeologists are still baffled what this meant. But it's just an evidence of human expression. So whatever they were trying to express during that time, we still cannot determine that. There are some caves in Europe na apparently clear ang message, no? But of course, there may be still open to interpretation because during that time, like I have taught, wala pang known language na people were actually drawing more than writing, because writing was not yet developed during the the Stone Age. The rock painting was also performed on cliff faces, but fewer of those have survived because of erosion. So this is one of the natural enemies of art, yung mga natural occurrences like the sun, the exposure of the artistic legacies to the elements like sun, wind, rain, erosion, lahat na yan. Pag nagtulong-tulong yan, wala na talaga. And even the process of natural decay. That's why also, class, in our history, in our own history in the Philippines, there's not much what you call this artifacts that we can find because of the kind of materials that our ancestors used to probably document their activities, their civilization. Yung mga nag-survive na mga artifacts, those have already been translated to the form that we now know. But syempre yung iba doon nag-umpisa na mag-disintegrate because of age and because of the kind of material that is used. So hindi naman kasi talaga ganun nagsusurvive ng ganun katagal na panahon kapag sinulat mo sa kahoy or you carve on wood, even on leaves. Kahit nga kung may papel na nung panahon na yon, we know that paper can be burned, no? So it needs to have a really, really good preservation technology para yon ay hindi masira ng tuluyan. One well-known example sa rock paintings of Astuvan Salmi in the Saimaa area of Finland. So here are representative photos of that. So to your right, may makikita kayo na in red, no? Parang tao ito. It's still undetermined kung ano yung nasa baba, but this is definitely an image of a human. Similar to this. This is not obviously blood, no? People might have used a particular substance that caused the caused these images to be preserved. The rock art of the Iberian Mediterranean basin represents a very different style with the human figure as the main focus, often seen in large groups with battles, dancing, and hunting all represented. So ito naman kumpleto. Meron siyang, maybe we can tell a story of this. No? There's the people who did this kind of rock art provided some context into the art that was produced, no? As well as other details, activities and details such as clothing. The figures are generally rather sketchily depicted in thin paint, with the relationships between the groups of humans and animals more carefully depicted than individual figures. So here's an example. To the left, in this part of the screen, you're seeing a white sketches of, we don't, hindi natin mawarian kung ano to eh. But with a carefully depiction of an artist, ito malamang yung ginagawa. So you're seeing, maybe this is a female apparently. Female who is walking up on vines, or this is a wooden structure kasi, and holding a basket, apparently a basket. Maybe she is gathering something, poking her hand on a hole, no? So We do not know what this female gatherer is doing. Maybe gathering eggs on a nest, or maybe gathering honey. We do not know. But there is a context. So the context here is gathering for food. Okay. This is an artistic conception. This is a conception, or this is the actual image taken from the rock art. So this is what another one. Apparently, this is a male holding a spear. So maybe he's a warrior going for a hunt. Okay, so there is a context. And here it's more clearly depicted here. There are many animals like deer, you have wild boar, you have bisons, you have many animals here that they hunt for food. Okay, and then here are people. Like I've said a while ago, there may be scenes about people in battles, dancing, all their activities, and you can guess that these are women because they are covered with a skirt-like uh, clothing. No, it's more it's more detailed than the other rock paintings there is. So these are the rock paintings of, again, the Iberian Mediterranean basin. Now we go to Celtic art. Okay, prehistoric Celtic art comes from much of Iron Age Europe and survives mainly in the form of high status metalwork, skillfully decorated with complex, elegant, and mostly abstract designs, often using curving and spiral forms. There are human heads and some fully represented animals, but full-length human figures at any size are so rare that their absence may represent a religious taboo. As the Romans conquered Celtic territories, it almost entirely vanished. But the style continued in limited use in the British Isles, and with the coming of Catholicism, it revived there in the insular style of the early Middle Ages. So yung Celtic art, it's mostly on the skill of the artists to do some metal work. No, they have learned how to forge metal and to make uh, complex and elegant designs on it. Okay, so mainly because perhaps it's not just for aesthetics, but mainly for mainly for ornaments, and perhaps even for battle implements, for battle tools. Yung mga vests, metal vests, and shields that they are using have some decoration. So when they go to war, or when they go to battle, no, they will be known by that particular brand, or parang may tatak sila na, oh, we came from this kind of tribe. Now, so that's prehistoric art. Now we go to the next historical period, and that's, we are now at classical art. Now, classical art is the term that is used when referring to the art that came from Greece. That's why this particular section begins with the mention of Greece, ancient Greece. Ancient Greece undoubtedly had or undoubtedly boasts in its history some of the greatest painters, sculptures, sculptors and great architects. So you can just imagine. Marami kasi sa Greece ang talagang we can say no that the surviving artistic artifacts nila until now standing. Just look at the Parthenon and yung mga monuments dedicated to their gods, no. Yeah, the Parthenon is an example of their architecture that has lasted to modern days. Makikita nyo yan na nakatayo siya sa isang hilly area overlooking a city. Okay? Greek marble sculpture is often described as the highest form of classical art. Painting on the pottery of ancient Greece and ceramics gives a particularly informative glimpse into the way society in ancient Greece functioned. So most of their paintings nasa pottery nila, and even on the way they design their floors, especially floors dedicated to the temples of their gods. And even in some homes, they design their tiles quite some elaborately. And these paintings have actually stories that are derived sa kanilang mga mythological heroes, no? Sa kanilang myths, sa kanilang stories. Black figure vase painting and red figure vase painting gives many surviving examples of what Greek painting was. So, yung mga makikita nyo sa internet na pagka sinabing Greek painting at nakakita kayo ng pots or pottery na mostly ginagamit ay black and red characteristic, na wala kayong makikitang ibang kulay, that is really characteristic of Greek painting na black yung pinaka surrounding ay pinaka background, tapos you only have an outline in white or you have an outline in red. Talagang ganon ang Greek visual art pagdating sa painting. Roman art, no? So when the Roman civilization came, no, they have borrowed much of the knowledge and everything they knew from the Greek civilization. So even the way they did their art was influenced primarily by Greece. Okay? We could say that Roman art is a descendant of ancient Greek art, particularly painting and sculpture. But it is also strongly influenced by the local Etruscan art of Italy. So yung Roman art is a fusion of ancient Greek art and local Etruscan art of Italy. Roman sculpture is primarily portraiture derived from the upper classes of society as well as depictions of the gods. However, Roman painting does have important unique characteristics. Among surviving Roman paintings are wall paintings, so mostly murals. Such painting can be grouped into four main styles or periods and may contain the first examples of trompe l'oeil, pseudo-perspective, and pure landscape. Almost all of the surviving painted portraits from the ancient world are a large number of coffin portraits or bust form. Bust form like itong nakikita nyo in your screen. It's an example of head. Nasa bust yan eh. Yung bust, yung mula ulo hanggang dibdib lang. So mostly ganun ang kanilang ano. They give an idea of the quality that the finest ancient work must have had. So, mostly ang mga nakalagay sa bust nila, and even in their coins, no, ay yung ulo ng mga Caesars that have ruled the Roman Empire for so many years. And even in the shields, when they go to war, they decorate their shields. So that's where they also paint, no? Now, yeah, so we're done with classical art. Actually, there are still many things about classical art that I would like to tell you, but of course, for fear that this is a very long discussion, that's why I shortened it. So we go to early medieval art. Migration period art is a general term for the art of the barbarian peoples who moved into formerly Roman territories. Celtic art in the 7th and 8th centuries saw a fusion with Germanic traditions through contact with the Anglo-Saxons, creating what is called the Hiberno-Saxon style or insular art, which was to be highly influential on the rest of the Middle Ages. Kaya naman tinawag na barbaric or barbarian peoples yun kasi ang tingin nila is they don't have the status of civilization that these uh, new tribe of new group of people are introducing. Kaya, but it cannot actually be, if you're going to ask me, it's not really that barbaric. Maybe it is of a different specimen of art, but of course they have their own opinions about why they consider it the kind of art and the kind of people as barbaric. Most surviving art from the medieval period was religious in focus, often funded by the church. Powerful ecclesiastical individuals such as bishops, communal groups such as abbeys, or wealthy secular patrons. So imagine when this what we call yung from Rome nag-spread out kasi yan eh. Rome was able to conquer so many territories in Europe. So there was this Roman Empire, and it included part of Britain, no, and yeah, most of Europe. That's why the spread of Catholicism was also prevalent. That's why even in their artistic expression, religion was mainly a theme, and it was funded by the church in their temples, in their worship houses, in their cathedrals, in their churches, and even in other paintings. And these had particular liturgical functions. Of course, the creation of the pictures or the images of saints. Yeah. One of the central questions about medieval art concerns its lack of realism. So pupunta na tayo sa specifics about the criticism of this kind of art. So wala daw siyang realism. A great deal of knowledge of perspective in art and understanding of the human figure was lost with the fall of Rome. So bumagsak talaga yung Roman Empire and all its territories, nagkanya-kanya na. So even the artistic legacy of Rome was lost to the local artistic legacies of the people that Rome had conquered before. But realism was not the primary concern of medieval artists. They were simply trying to send a religious message, a task which demands clear, iconic images instead of precisely rendered ones. So talagang in the early medieval to medieval period, you will see often mas marami kayo makikitang religious images that have been part of people's society, the society at the time. Now we go to another art, division of time or art movement. Okay. Ito naman ay Romanesque. Romanesque art refers to the period from about 1000 to the rise of Gothic art in the 12th century. This was a period of increasing prosperity and the first to see a coherent style used across Europe, from Scandinavia to Switzerland. So ano naman itong Romanesque and how is it different from the art that people saw during the medieval period? Romanesque art is vigorous and direct, was originally brightly colored and is often very sophisticated. Stained glass and enamel on metal work became important media. So, yung stained glass art in churches, yan, it's part of Romanesque art. Pati yung enamel sa metal work. And larger sculptures in the round developed, like what you are seeing here. Although high relief was the principal technique. Yung relief kasi, para siyang yung, it's like a sculpture na nakaangat sa surface. So that's called relief, no? Its architecture is dominated by thick walls and round-headed windows and arches with much carved decoration. So ang Romanesque art, especially in terms of sculpture and architecture, makikita mo siya, very prominent yung mga arches, no? Very prominent yung decorations that are very highly carved. Like nakikita nyo, ito ay parang end or edge ng isang column sa isang in a building. So that's just one of the many evidences of Romanesque art. Now we go to another one, which is Gothic art. So ano siguro naiisip nyo pagka Gothic, dark and very dim, no? Meron siguro na-associate natin yung term na Gothic to dark is probably because of this. But when we say Gothic art, sabi dito, it is a variable term depending on the craft, place, and time, because even until now, Gothic concepts are existing. Pero nag-umpisa na siya noon pa. The term originated with Gothic architecture in 1140. But Gothic painting did not appear until around 1200 when it diverged from the Romanesque style. So nag-diverge naman ito. Mostly ng Gothic art pieces are those that reflect architecture. Katulad itong cathedral na nakikita nyo. This is an example of an evidence of Gothic art or Gothic architecture. Gothic sculpture was born in France in 1144 with the renovation of the Abbey Church of Saint Denis and spread throughout Europe. So nag-umpisa lang siya sa France, then kumalat. By the 13th century, it had become the international style, replacing Romanesque. So one style, the Romanesque style, wala na siya sa trend. Ang trending na noon is Gothic. And the Gothic style is responsible, was the inspiration for the establishment of so many architectural of structures na ang common theme ay ganito. Mga spiked churches. Yan. So punta lang kayo, no? Salbawa sa Notre Dame Cathedral, yan. Isa yan sa mga examples of Gothic architecture. Now we go to one of the most interesting periods in history, because this is not just a period of referring to art. It's actually a movement that has swept Europe not only in terms of art, but in terms of thought, in terms of uh, sabihin na natin all around way of thinking ng mga tao na yon, which is the Renaissance. Renaissance is a French word, if I'm not mistaken. It was taken from a French word which means rebirth. It is characterized by a focus on the arts of ancient Greece and Rome. So, nagkaroon ng revival sa interest for the ancient Greek and Roman civilization. So, balik sa classical. But with greater emphasis on other subject matters. Which led to this movement led to many changes in both the technical aspects of painting and sculpture, as well as to their subject matter. So it's not just Renaissance is not just a movement that has influenced thinking, science, philosophy, education, and religion. It's lahat talagang kumbaga lahat na encompass niya. Okay, and this movement began in Italy, okay, which is rich in Roman heritage. So, syempre, when you go back to your roots, they went back to their roots. They tried studying again their ancient civilization, Roman civilization, and that is what brought them to this kind of movement, which is the Renaissance. Now, during the Renaissance, painters began to enhance the realism of their work by using new techniques in perspective, thus representing three dimensions more authentically. So, mas naging intense ang pagiging realist ng mga Renaissance artists. Lahat na yan, painters, sculptors. You can actually look at this picture. This is a picture of, ang title niya kasi is si David. No? It was carved. One of the legacies of the Renaissance period. Artists also began to use new techniques in the manipulation of light and darkness and the development of sfumato and chiaroscuro. These are, if I'm not mistaken, techniques in painting. Sculptors too began to rediscover many ancient techniques such as contrapposto. Following with the humanist spirit of the age, art became more secular in subject matter. So lahat na sasakit na niya, hindi lang basta religious themes, but also secular themes. Which depicted ancient mythology in addition to Christian themes. The genre of art is often referred to as Renaissance classicism. In the Northern Europe, the most important Renaissance innovation was the widespread use of oil paints or oil-based paints, which allowed for greater color and intensity kasi oil was more elastic, no? And it gave the painting more vibrance and more life. In European art, Renaissance classicism spawned two different movements. So nanganak to, Mannerism and the Baroque. Mannerism, a reaction against the idealist perfection of classicism, employed distortion of light and spatial frameworks in order to emphasize the emotional content of a painting and the emotions of the painter. So, parang siya, it's veering away from the formality of the rigidness of classicism, yung Mannerism. Ito namang Baroque art took the representationalism of the Renaissance to new heights, emphasizing detail, movement, lighting, and drama in their search for beauty. So, ang Baroque art is more of, ito yung masasabi nyo, nandito yung aesthetics, nandito yung sobrang masasabi mo na kung sa painting grabing gandang painting because it's really uh, rich in detail. Baroque art is often seen as part of the Counter-Reformation, the artistic element of the revival of spiritual life in the Roman Catholic Church. Additionally, the emphasis that Baroque art placed on grandeur is seen as absolutist in nature. And also, kumbaga, di ba nga ang Baroque na ipinanganak siya during the Renaissance time, parang halos pinalitan niya yung Renaissance ideals ng art. Dito sa Baroque art, even political contexts have been explored, no? As well as religious. In both, paintings and sculptures were characterized by a strong element of drama, emotion, and theatricality. So makikita nyo dyan, itong painting, hari yan eh. So makikita nyo kung gaano ka-elaborate yung kanyang robes. And he is standing like, yeah, a dignified ruler. This is a French king. I'm not sure if this is King Louis. I forgot. I honestly forgot this painting, but this is typically a portrait of a French king, how they are represented as monarchs. No, talagang todo yung drama. It has to be detailed. They have to look royal. They have to appear as if they're flawless, no? They're saintly, ganyan. So Baroque painters try to put that kind of ideal into rulers when in fact meron dyan talagang in history they are known to be notorious, no? The Baroque paintings were particularly ornate and elaborate in nature, often using rich, warm colors with dark undertones. Pomp and grandeur were important elements of the Baroque artistic movement in general, like what you are seeing in this painting. Baroque art in many ways was similar to Renaissance art. As a matter of fact, the term was initially used in a derogative manner to describe post-Renaissance art and architecture, which was over-elaborate. Baroque art can be seen as a more elaborate and dramatic readaptation of late Renaissance art. Okay, so that's Baroque art. Hindi siya Baroque, no? Na very crude. Ayun siya, very aesthetic. Masasabi mong bongga talaga. It's full of drama. It's a kind of movement that, artistic movement that implores great detail, pomp, grandeur. Okay, so that's Baroque art. Now we go to Rococo art. Ano naman tong Rococo na to? And how is this different from its predecessor, which is Baroque? By the 18th century, however, Baroque art was falling out of fashion as many deemed it too melodramatic and also gloomy. And it developed into the Rococo, which emerged in France. Okay? So parang katulad lang ng ibang artistic movements, it went out of fashion, it went out of style until a new style was born. Rococo art was actually more elaborate than the Baroque, but compared to the Baroque art, which is more on high on drama, high on very serious in theme. Okay, the Rococo art was less serious and it was playful. Okay, yung Baroque art if Baroque art uses rich and strong colors, Rococo used pale, creamier shades, like the painting that you are seeing here. Mas angat siya, mas light ang feel when you see a Rococo painting. Okay, the artistic movement no longer placed an emphasis on politics and religion, focusing instead on lighter themes such as romance, celebration, and appreciation of nature. So mas light ang theme ng Rococo paintings because it's no longer dealing with very heavy themes or very heavy contexts. Rococo art often refused symmetry in favor of asymmetrical designs. Okay? Before, it sought inspiration from the artistic forms and ornamentation of Far Eastern Asia, resulting in the rise in favor of porcelain figurines and chinoiserie in general. It flourished for a short while. Nevertheless, the Rococo style soon fell out of favor, being seen by many as gaudy and superficial movement, emphasizing aesthetics over meaning. So pareho lang din sila ng Baroque na although Rococo art was less serious, people saw it as something very shallow, very superficial. It did not capture the real essence and the real meaning of what art, of how people saw art and how people saw what art was supposed to be doing during that time. So ano yung pumalit sa Rococo art? Okay. Throughout the 18th century, a counter movement opposing the Rococo sprang up in different parts of Europe. It was now widely known as Neoclassicism. It despised the perceived superficiality and frivolity of Rococo art and desired for a return to the simplicity, order, and purism of classical antiquity, especially ancient Greece and Rome. Yung Rococo art kasi, kaya may mention dyan ng superficiality and frivolity. Marami kasing mga painting sa what you call this, maraming painting na under the Rococo art. Yung ano lang, sobrang babaw lang. Pwedeng more on, halimbawa, how women were, yung gowns nila, yung dresses nila, kaya ganyan. More on fashion trends. And it did not capture the essence of what people were looking for in art because not all people during that time can afford to have a portrait of you painted in such elaborate dresses. So itong neoclassicism naman na to, favored for simplicity, order, and purism of classical antiquity. This painting that you're seeing of a woman looking perhaps from a viewing deck, it's an example of painting in the Neoclassicism movement. Now, Neoclassicism was the artistic component of the intellectual movement known as the Enlightenment. Nanganak na kasi nanganak talaga yung Renaissance. So, ang dami ng movements that came out of it. The Enlightenment was idealistic and put its emphasis on objectivity, reason, and empirical truth. Neoclassicism had become widespread in Europe throughout the 18th century, and it can be seen as a political movement as well as an artistic and cultural one. So just like Renaissance, yung Neoclassicism is not just an artistic movement, but also a movement that has influenced thinking, politics, and society in general. Neoclassical art places emphasis on order, symmetry, and classical simplicity. Simple lang, no? No grand themes. Common themes in neoclassical art include courage and war, and as were commonly explored in ancient Greek and Roman art. Neoclassical art, yeah, like I've said, it explored more on the lives of people. Kasi during that time, wars were also very frequent. So artists also took this opportunity to um, put on canvas what they saw, the 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 things that they saw in war, and it's not something elaborate. Typically, painters in the neoclassical style attached a great deal of importance to the art of drawing. And so the surfaces of neoclassical paintings were entirely smooth and utterly devoid of any brush strokes. So wala siyang nakaangat na mga paint na talagang sobrang pino niya. No? Kaya nga mga purists din tong artists na to eh. The themes are very simple, but the execution is, they're trying to make it as flawless as possible. And neoclassical painting is generally a form of history painting. Yung history painting, whenever there are important historical events that transpire, mostly neoclassical painters are the ones who put that on canvas. Okay, so that's neoclassical painting. So, ano sila? Talagang they strictly follow conventions. They observe simplicity, but they're very strict about painting conventions. Kumbaga, you're not supposed to deviate from that. So another form of art came about which objects to this kind of highly objectivity in painting, and which is called romanticism. So it's not what you're thinking of na romantic painters, no, na alam nating term na romantic. It's not that. Kasi when you say romantic or romanticism, it places emphasis on more on individualism and more on an emotional approach to something. Here, in this case, a more emotional approach to the arts. Romanticism placed an emphasis on nature, especially when aiming to portray the power and beauty of the natural world. So it's more on the natural world. Dito, marami tayong, there are so many painters who may be called romanticists or romantic painters who painted more about landscapes, no, and man's dealing with nature. Okay, and romantic painters also sought a highly personal approach to art. It is about individual feelings. So often the use of color for a romantic painter, color is very important in the sense of it has to express feelings and emotion. Okay. Like the neoclassical, romantic art took inspiration from ancient Greek and Roman art. However, for unlike the neoclassical, romantic art drew from these influences from the Greek and Roman art. They used that as an inspiration, as a way to create symbolism and imagery. So even yung aesthetic qualities ng romantic art, like itong painting na nakikita niyo, it's very aesthetic, but it's a kind of a romantic painting. Nakuha naman niya yan sa medievalism and Gothicism. So maraming influences ang romantic art, but the message is very clear. It's not about the strict conventions of neoclassicism. It's more about the natural world. Then, by the turn of the 19th century, ito na yung mga period na Europe was already beginning to grapple with socio-political chaos. Okay? And the rapid industrialization of Europe, nag-umpisa na yung industrial age, no? And those who are in power have squandered wealth and people were living in poverty, no? And a new working class came about, which created some sort of a revolution in society. Now, these events in the history of Europe created another movement, which also sparked changes in how art is going to be presented. And that's called realism. So realism, from the term itself, what you see is what you get. Like here, no? You're seeing peasants, no? Mga mahihirap. Kasi sa Baroque, sa even in yung sa Rococo painting, pati yung sa neoclassical and even romantic, you are given pictures of an ideal life of someone who is affluent. Parang walang lugar doon ng poverty. Parang wala kang, you cannot see a painting of a person who is poor in those kinds of from paintings that came from those movements. No? Laging may sense of beauty. Pero sa realism, no, it's a different story. So you will even see the ugliness of society back then. You will see the poverty, you will see the struggle of people. So these are what the things that real artists who do realism work on. Next is Impressionism. Out of the naturalist ethic of realism grew a major artistic movement, which is Impressionism. The Impressionists pioneered the use of light in painting as they attempted to capture light as seen from the human eye. So if you're going to see painting just like that, di ba parang it's so bright, parang ang saya-saya, parang it's nighttime but it is still bright, no? So this is an example of an Impressionist painting. As a direct outgrowth of Impressionism came the development of Post-Impressionism. So almost lahat ng mga paintings na makikita nyo na sobrang maliwanag, no? These are all about Impressionism. Next, after Impressionism and Post-Impressionism came Fauvism, often considered as the first modern genre of art. Here is an example of a painting that embraces a Fauvist's philosophy. Parang modern art na siya. It's no longer as compared to the other paintings and other movements. It's less detailed than those. So kung ikukumpara mo siya, siguro if you see a Baroque painting of a flower vase, it's not as detailed as this. This one is para ka lang naglagay ng paint dyan and then you just slap it on, you just manipulated the brush a little and then you have a painting like that. Just like Impressionists revolutionized light, so did the Fauvists rethink color, painting their canvases in bright, wild hues. So parang magkapatid itong dalawang art movements na yan. After the Fauvists, modern art began to develop in all its forms, ranging from Expressionism, concerned with evoking emotion through objective works of art, to Cubism, the art of transposing a four-dimensional reality onto a flat canvas. So yung mga four-dimensional, yung medyo nakaka-trick sa mata, no? Mga optical illusions. Okay. to abstract art. Now, we know many painters who did abstract art. Picasso is one, Pablo Picasso is one. These new art forms pushed the limits of traditional notions of art and corresponded to the similar rapid changes that were taking place in human society, technology, and thought. So, as human civilization progressed, pati yung development ng art, sumasabay sila. So if you have been seeing all the works of art that are placed side by side with what you're reading in the slides, makakita kayo ng pagkakaiba. Ito, Fauvist yan, no? And then you have Impressionism, Realism, Romantic art. As you go, parang mas naging less, less detailed. But there is still something good about these paintings that you can see as an expression of emotion, of thought during that time. So these are all the things that I was able to share with you. So pardon me if there are so many other things that I wasn't able to cover, but these are just some of the things that I do believe are important to have a general understanding of art in Europe. So thank you very much for listening to me again. I am your teacher host, Cesar Vizcaya, wishing everyone to be safe and God bless everyone. Bye.